Welcome everyone to Sister Wives with Mary Jane Kay. Today, I'll be breaking down Season 1, Episode 9 of Sister Wives, the Sister Wives Honeymoon Special. It's going to be good. It's going to be cringy, stomach-churning, and difficult to get through watching these two soulmates do everything in their willpower to get through the filming so they can hit the sack and go at it like bunnies. But miraculously, they push through, even though the viewer has to stomach the endless PDA and this almost 2-week-long honeymoon, most likely courtesy of TLC, is in a place I know very well, the lovely San Diego. The whole show felt like a tourism ad for this beautiful city. As nice as this traditional honeymoon in paradise may seem, let's remember that there are 3 other wives and 17 kids at home without their husband and father, as Robin and Cody endlessly touch and hug and pet each other in public to get through filming with all the googly eyes one can handle seeing for a lifetime. Imagine how Christine, Mary, and Janelle feel. They only get a quarter of his time, and Robin gets an almost 2-week honeymoon, disrupting that. Christine, Janelle, and Mary all got a few night road trips in a car in places like Wyoming and a roadside econo motel. Robin gets a timeshare and a trip to the wild animal park and surf lessons and all kinds of fun stuff. The other wives were lucky to get a few days cramped in a car, maybe stopping at a national park or Vista Point, and a night in the Motel 6 with a jizz-stained mattress and God only knows what other bodily fluids, and who knows the last time the comforter was washed. I wouldn't want a blacklight in that room. But that won't do for King Cody and his new royal consort, Her Royal Highness of Lehigh, Queen Robin. Soulmates get different honeymoons, fit for the Queen, especially when TLC foots the bill. Just pure speculation on my part that if TLC gets to film, they're probably footing most of the bill, and that's possibly why Robin gets this huge vacation, not that it's an excuse. The Browns of Lehigh get their timeshare and rented Sebring convertible and ride in the Gaslamp District downtown on a pedicab too. And there are walks on the beach to check out the beautiful San Diego sunsets. It's all love, 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 as his wives get the joys of internalizing all the suffering and anxiousness and anxiety and jealousy and insecurity, knowing Cody is going to Pound Town for almost 2 weeks straight, and they still don't know what their new normal will be, and they know they didn't get this type of honeymoon, or this level of investment from Cody, or this amount of time alone with Cody almost ever, and they still don't know what their new normal will be with Robin entering the family. So imagine waking up with all that spinning in your head and all that dread of the unknown brewing in the pit of your stomach. Does this seem fair to Cody's other wives? Is it fair and equal treatment of all 4 of his wives? I want to make something clear here, by the way. There is a viewer of mine, Diana. I won't put her full name in case she prefers that, and I want to be respectful. I will be doing an episode eventually on the FLDS faith, and I want to also cover how the principle of polygamy is prescribed to be lived under the faith, and to see how Cody stacks up to that from what we see on the show, since they all got into this lifestyle of polygamy based on the faith. I also want to make a distinction between the LDS, the mainstream Mormon church, who broke with the practice of polygamy way over a century ago, and the FLDS, fundamentalist Mormon church, that is a different faith, a separate faith. They do follow the basic Mormon teachings with the FLDS, but they also follow additional doctrines and ideas like polygamy and other stuff that I will briefly touch on in that episode when I get to it. And there are things that are really not fair and equal as far as who can hold a priesthood and who can't, as far as where you come from and what you look like. And it's a lot of disturbing stuff that I don't agree with, that I will touch on, but I will put a trigger warning because it was not stuff that most people would be happy with. And it's not stuff that is acceptable to me or for any type of society that is equitable and fair. I disagree completely with any type of bias or racism based on how a person looks, where a person's from, what religion a person is, and I don't agree with any of that. But I will cover it eventually. I am having a lot of trouble finding the polygamous ideal specifically under the faith, but I will keep going researching that. And if I have to, perhaps I will contact some people who might be willing to share what the expectations are for the husband's treatments of his wives in polygamy under the faith doctrine, just to see how Cody stacks up, since the faith is what created the Brown family structure. It was done on faith, not just as a lifestyle choice, so I think it's very important to explore that. I do want to point out, though, that according to Diana and also some other people familiar with some of the Mormon faith and a little about the polygamy, things are supposed to be fair and equal across the board, and it isn't acceptable to hurt your wives or treat them unequally or unfairly in any way. For example, one thing that I was told is if one wife, let's say, gets a house worth $1 million, let's just say as an example, and another wife wants a house that's more modest, maybe worth $250,000, that wife that decided to get the cheaper, less expensive house should technically be getting $750,000 in equity, either put in the bank to buy a car, start a business, to do with as she sees fit, but she technically should be getting the exact same amount to purchase her home, whether she gets a smaller home or not, as far as the FLDS faith goes. Each wife should get the same amount, and if they want a smaller house, they have every right to get it, but they should still be receiving equal amounts for home buying or for anything. As any wife that gets one thing, all the wives have to get the exact same amount, whether they buy something of that amount or not. I mean, a wife could choose to say, well, I'm going to spend $250,000 on a house, and I'm going to also buy a $50,000 car, and I'm going to spend the rest of the money for my kids' college tuition. They can do what they want with the money, but they technically are all supposed to get exactly equal financially, whether or not they decide to get a house that's also worth $1 million. It's fine. It's their choice, but they are technically owed that money. And that's supposed to be how it works, to my understanding. So just to clarify, each wife should get the same amount. And if they want a smaller house, that's perfectly fine, but they should be still receiving equal amounts for the difference financially for home buying. And they would get that difference in their bank account to spend as they like, if I understand correctly. So as a wife, you can have the car you prefer, the house you prefer, but if it's less than what the other wives get, you are entitled to get that difference financially to do with as you see fit. I hope I'm clear in explaining this correctly and properly. So if one wife, for example, gets a 10-day vacation in Maui and the other wife gets a 2-day vacation in Cape May, let's say, they technically should still get that difference made up to them, financially or otherwise, with other smaller trips, whatever, but each wife must get equal. And if they decide or prefer to get less in one arena, whether it's a lesser car, lesser house, then they are entitled to that difference in their bank account. Everything is supposed to be 100% equal, equitable, and fair. That's how I gather it should be done. And I may not be 100% right in how I expressed it. I'd really like to interview someone very familiar with the faith in order to do this proper justice. It's very important to me that I do this right. And I'm finding very limited information on the internet, even through reputable research journals and peer-reviewed stuff. There's just not a lot of information out there. As far as the church accepting a man taking on wives, they have to approve that the man is capable to pay for all of his wife's needs and kids, and this is supposed to be including health insurance. And everything should be fair and equal. That's how it is supposed to be lived, from my understanding. So although this honeymoon is normal for a monogamous marriage, is it fair and equal to what Mary, Christine, and Janelle got? Robin shows us she and Cody's honeymoon nest, as she calls their honeymoon suite. Cody is all giggles. He says it's been a long wait, so here we are, as he sits on the couch with Robin. Cody says it's been easy, and Robin says it's going well, it's fun, and they show Cody and Robin walking along the beach at sunset, as Cody says the long wait created a good foundation for a relationship, he guesses. Robin agrees, and they are all blushy and smiles like they want to rip each other's clothes off but can't because they have this obligation to film for TLC. It's obvious all they want to do is go at it. Robin has on the weirdest clothes, by the way. She has on bootleg cut jeans and a brown long sleeve shirt with a white, pink, and black striped short sleeve polo shirt over it. It looks like something a 60-year-old would wear to the golf course on Sundays. The V-neck of the polo shirt has rhinestones on it for the added dose of fun. It's really just a hideous outfit. And the shirt she has on above the long sleeve shirt has actual short sleeves and zero cleavage. And San Diego isn't a place you really need layers, really, unless it's very early morning or maybe late at night. So why she has this modesty choice of layered shirts is unknown, because there's no cleavage or immodesty if she were to wear the short sleeve polo. This is really something that you would get maybe at Marshall's in the early 90s. It's something that a 6-year-old would wear. And I find this funny because last episode they were talking about how all the teenagers love to raid her closets, but I doubt that. They show the lovebirds pausing their walk along the sand for an idyllic kiss as they take in the sunset, heads together with the sun falling between their heads below the horizon and the waves. And it's all happening between their heads with their foreheads pressed together so romantically, like As the World Turns. Robin says, "Our alone time, it's finally," and she stops. She wanted to say here, I think. And then she says, "They have a license," meaning they are now allowed, despite any pain it brings the wives, to bang like bunnies and kiss endlessly and flaunt PDA, and they won't be taking complaints for it any longer. She boasts it's been a long time, and we did it all right. Really, did they do it all right? Following all the right, proper standards and etiquette that the other Brown wives followed, like the kiss at the engagement rather than at the altar, like the other Brown wives, or Cody picking Robin's dress, or Cody giving Robin equal time to the wives as the wives had pre-marriage. Christine and Janelle felt it inappropriate to kiss a married man before they too were married, or to request or take equal time as a wife before they were married, or to have a big, huge wedding reception to a man who has already married other wives. So they did small, modest family meals together and small, modest get-togethers. Mary got a big wedding reception as a first wife, but all three wives also only got 2 or 3 night road trips in places like Wyoming, staying at shitty roadside economy motels, not almost 2-week trips to San Diego in a luxury suite and surfing lessons and trips to the wild animal parks in a rented midlife crisis Sebring convertible. On top of that, and this is just pure speculation on my part, but Robin boasted it's been a long time. We did it all right, meaning by the book, up to the right etiquette and standards. But the standards were not the same as the other wives followed. With sex, or as they call it, intimacy, God forbid they call it sex, what's so wrong with calling sex sex? Anyways, with sex, we know a few things. Robin already broke most of the other standards during her courtship to Cody that the other wives followed. And we also know during her time with Cody, she had the private rental. We also know that she has made him eggs, and eggs are typically a breakfast food, by the way. And you can also eat eggs at night. There is no rule against that. I've had eggs for dinner, so I might be reading too much into things. But there are just these little things that we can use to put in the column that make it even more possible that it's possible, and this is pure speculation, that they definitely or highly probably could have had sex before marriage. So we know that Robin has made him eggs, which are typically a breakfast food. And we also know that Cody was spending the night, and it's highly unlikely to me that 2 grown adults, one 30 with 3 kids, the other one, I don't know, maybe he was like 40 or close to 50. I don't know how old Cody is, but he's older. He spending the night at her house, at her private rental, or even when he was spending the night 5 hours, when she lived 5 hours away, that he's spending the night and not having sex. I find that very hard to believe, in my opinion. We also know before the move to the rental a block away from the big house, Robin couldn't live in due to space constraints. She lived 5 hours away, and Cody would get in his midlife crisis 2-seater luxury Lexus sports car, midlife crisis convertible car with his wisps of hair near his temples, hanging on for dear life, and he would cruise in style to spend weekends with Robin. And we also know, not to be crass, but obviously Robin has 3 kids. She was no virgin. She was 30 years old. He was no virgin. So in my opinion, it's very possible that they really didn't wait until marriage. I'm not saying 100% I know for sure that they had sex or that they didn't have sex. I don't know anything for sure. And thank God, I don't want to be a fly on that wall. But I think it's likely a high probability or very possible that they went there pre-altar, just like they broke all the other courtship standards. So Robin saying we did everything right and highlighting that over like 5 times during this episode is highly suspect in my opinion. Also, when Robin basically outed herself by mentioning the thing on the couch and she got super defensive and had some really odd body language, it felt like her guilty conscience was vomiting everywhere in that confessional room. She was mentioning how she deserved equal time on the rotation as Cody's other wives got, even though that isn't the standard the other wives received when they were just fiancés. And as justification for that, she was using having a longer courtship and the sacrifice of having to move to a house paid for by Cody and his wives and having to change her whole life and her kids having to change schools as a reason she deserved that equal time as a wife as just a fiancé. And for his wives to be getting less at a time when at that time going to Robin that Cody spent the equal time share of his time with her, that time could have been used by Cody to make his existing wives and kids feel more reassured and secure when everything they had ever known was about to rip apart and change into something new and unrecognizable. They weren't getting a consolation prize for their financial and emotional suffering of accepting Robin into the family and the changes it would bring to the dynamic. They were getting less time, less of Cody's presence, less connection with Cody, less finances to work with, shrinking budgets, less attention. The kids were getting less time with their dad. They were getting more work, more stress, more suffering. But Robin expected more, saying the time, the equal time that she would getting time as a fiancé, an equal time as a 4th wife, was time that was deserved and justified, and it was time she needed. So Mary said some things are for after marriage when Cody and Robin are married and Robin has the wife status, and no one had their mind on sex. They were referring to Cody's time and Robin getting an equal share of his time as a wife, getting 1/4 of his time. And they were referring to Cody's time and Cody giving Robin equal time as a fiancé to what the wives got. And she interrupted and she said, "You mean the thing?" And Mary was like, "No, not the thing." And Robin mentioned it very defensively and out of the blue. Why? So she made Cody eggs. Now she's making a big deal about equal time. We know she had a private rental. We know that before that, during the courtship, there were 5-hour trips to see Robin and Cody would spend weekends. And then we see her defensiveness, her bringing up the thing of her own volition, and her guilty conscience is basically bringing sex up herself as what Mary might be referring to as things that should wait for the wife and husband until after marriage. Now saying they did everything right when we all know she got different standards of courtship than the other wives. And she also had different levels of investment from Cody from the start. That all makes a case that most likely they didn't wait until marriage. And it seems more suspect when Robin says, "We waited so long. We did it all right." How convincing. That makes it even more suspect, in my opinion, to just add to the list of things that make it even more likely that possibly they really didn't wait until after the marriage. They waited 10 months, and Robin says that's a long time. And Cody explains, in this lifestyle and community, it's a long time. Cody explains that most polygamists court for 60 to 90 days, and then they're married. Maybe if premarital sex was not off the table, there wouldn't be this rush to marry a person because you are dying to get it in, and you can get it in safely and get to know the person and do it responsibly to see if a lifelong marriage and the lifestyle is something you want. So I don't understand why they can't just use protection and do it responsibly rather than rush to get married to a person that might not be the right fit for you. Maybe a lot of people married out of wanting to fulfill lust, and they have these 1 to 3 month courtships, and then they give it, let's say, give it a year, give it 2 years, and I guarantee most of the women regret their decision to marry so quickly, and they know by that point that it was done basically out of lust. Robin explains that it's really different for the existing wives who struggle with the idea of sitting there we go with the sitting there, watching their husband be in this little dating love situation with a girl that he's not married to. Robin used the wrong pronoun, saying she's not married to rather than he. She makes a lot of mistakes with syntax and grammar and vocab in general. And again, she uses sitting here and sitting there, basically every other sentence, every other phrase. One day, I really want to do a drinking game live or bingo or something with prizes with all of these silly phrases like, sitting there, and on and on. Robin says it's not a guarantee when you're courting. You can always turn around. That's another one Robin uses frequently, turn around, sitting there, And she says you can always turn around and say, this isn't going to work out for me. She continues and she says, so it's a triple whammy of her typical lingo. And she says, just like any other relationship, you can turn around and say, this isn't going to work out for me. Cody says, hopefully it all changes with the marriage, which it always does in his experience. By it all, Cody means his wife's upset with Robin coming in and the emotional struggles they face. And he reduces it all down to it all dismissively, hoping Robin, now being a wife, makes it poof and vanish, so it's no longer an inconvenience to His Majesty King Cody of Lehigh and Her Royal Highness the Queen Robin. That shows how inconsiderate and selfish they both are, assuming that now that she's married, his wife's pesky resistance and difficult emotions will evaporate into thin air, knowing they got to fuck like bunnies on a nearly 2-week honeymoon in paradise, while they only got a few nights road trip and a stay at the Motel 6. Robin's heart swells with love for these ladies, who she felt sacrificed everything because they care about her happiness so much. But she and Cody can't seem to really care too much about what Cody refers to dismissively as it all, meaning his wife's pesky insecurities and jealousies and those pesky emotions flying around everywhere. And both he and Robin don't want to deal with them. They see it as an inconvenience to them enjoying their soulmate one-on-one wavelength love, and they hope now the marriage makes the wives acquiesce to the new order of things and just shove it all down. There is no real acknowledgement of how Robin gets a luxury honeymoon for 6 times the length of time they got, where they got a couple night road trips and cheap seedy motels for 2 or 3 night stays. And they got to go to Wyoming and Cody's home where he grew up. How romantic and fun is it when you want to take a silkwood shower and check the mattress and comforter with a black light? There is no acknowledgement of how the wives feel and knowing their husband is off banging his soulmate, and how they feel about themselves and the kids missing their 1/4 of time on the rotation, their equal time, for nearly 2 weeks, all sacrificed and given to Robin. There's just dismissively, and well, we waited a long time and we did it right, and Robin is a wife now, so there will surely be no more of that pesky trouble for us anymore. Now we have a license to fuck and gush and do PDA, and all that annoying trouble my wives make with their obnoxious emotions, that gets in the way of us flaunting our love. That will all end because Robin is a wife now. So the wives better suck it up and keep sweet regardless of what they suffer. We don't care. Let them eat cake. We're above it. And we aren't really going to understand or validate or comprehend or have a shred of empathy or compassion. We are pissed their struggles cloud our experience of love and of being soulmates, and Robin is a wife now, so they better shut it. That's basically the message I'm getting, in my opinion. That's what this feels like to me, in my opinion. Cody says Robin is in the wives club. She's not a girlfriend or a fiance. She's a wife. And Cody says wives are comfortable with another wife, but they are just not comfortable with a girlfriend or a fiance. Robin just says, yeah. By the way, Let them eat cake is a reference, for those who might not be familiar, just in case, to Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, during the French Revolution. She was told that the peasants were starving and they had not even a crumb of bread to eat. And her response was, let them eat cake. I know this isn't a history podcast, but that phrase and that situation reminds me completely of Cody and Robin, the queen being so out of touch with reality and humanity and human decency, with not a shred of empathy or compassion for the starving peasants' plight. When she was told that they had no bread to eat, not even a morsel of bread, not even a crumb, her response was, so let them eat cake. And it really reminds me of Robin and Cody, especially when Cody says, she's a wife now, and my wives are fine with a wife, dismissing the plight and suffering of his wives and being so out of touch with his wives' reality and the human and emotional struggles that his wives face, dismissing it and discounting it, with Robin's a wife now, and Robin saying, well, we waited 10 months, and 10 months is a long time. We did it all right, with such a smug attitude, saying it so smugly and insensitively and selfishly. They are both getting what they want, and they are happy, and their egos are happy, and that's all they are concerned with, in my opinion. They throw in little comments like it's hard for them, but they don't really care to really get it or understand, and they don't want to pay those pesky emotions and feelings and struggles that the other wives feels. They don't want to give it too much credence, because if they did, it would make them look bad. And Robin couldn't say things like her heart swells with love for his wives, and Cody couldn't say, oh, I am doing this for my faith and it hurts my wives. It's inevitable, but we signed up for this. It's a must. My hands are bound. It's my faith. It makes us better. If they acknowledge it for real, they will lose, and they know it, in my opinion. These people do mental gymnastics to dismiss reality and the suffering of the other wives. It's absolutely ridiculous to feel and assume that because Robin is now a wife, the other wives will feel less hurt or suffering, or they will struggle less with insecurity or jealousy or competition or emotional upset because Robin is a wife now. If anything, it only makes it worse for his wives. And maybe they feel they have to now shove it down and pretend, but it will always be magnified, particularly with Robin, because she always gets all of her needs met. She gets her every want, like a bigger house, a better lifestyle, a nanny. The wives don't all get the same, and they don't all get treated the same financially or otherwise, or with attention and communication and emotion and investment and intimacy levels from Cody. And they aren't all seen as equals to Cody, and there is a hierarchy, spoken or not. And Robin is the indisputable favorite wife. So if anything, it's worse. She is a wife now. For the wives, the issues and the suffering will worsen, not improve. And saying she's a wife in the wives club, my wives are good with it, is delusional and irrational and just a way to sweep the obvious under the rug, pink elephants and all. It discounts his wife's emotions and dismisses everything they go through, and this whole line of conversation is dishonest and dismissive and invalidating of the other wives just to try and save face and make themselves look better or feel better, while the wives feel ripped apart inside. And let's not forget, the wives still don't know what their new normal will be. All they know is Robin is a wife now, and Cody is taken with her, and she's the favorite wife in the hierarchy. Spoken or not, it's clear. She gets different standards and levels of investment from Cody from day one of the courtship, and she's a wife now, and both she and Cody are in la-la land, dismissive of the wives' true suffering and struggles, and everything is up in the air for Cody's other wives and kids. They don't know the new normal. Everything is just up in the air, suspended. They had the wedding, and now there's this nearly 2-week honeymoon before the wives can even begin to adjust and figure out the way things will be under the new structure and the new dynamic, with all they have ever known gone, never to be the same again, not knowing what it is to be replaced with. They're not going to know what everything will be, what the unknown will be. And now, even their time on the rotation is sacrificed to Robin for this nearly 2-week honeymoon. And that time with Cody they could have had during this nearly 2-week absence would have provided some much needed reassurance and stability and security to them. And it was needed, but they sacrificed it to Robin at a time when they needed it the most, at a time when that rotation, that time in the schedule with their husband, The wives needed it, and the kids needed that time with their dad more than Robin needed a 12-day honeymoon to paradise. The wives understood this. They took a couple of night road trips, but for King Cody and Queen Robin of Lehigh, a mere road trip for the peasants that the peasants got wasn't enough for them. Back in Lehigh at the one big house, Robin's kids and Cody's kids are all playing, and Robin explains that she had her mom take care of her kids during her honeymoon with Cody. But Mary called Robin and she said they missed the kids, and she asked if they could take them for a couple of days, and Robin agreed. Mary says she thought it would be fun to keep Robin's kids for a little bit while she was gone. Funnily enough, we see Christine shooing Robin's two daughters and Savannah out of a room, and Isabel reassuring her mom she'll be nice. So Mary asked to take Robin's kids, but it looks like Christine is doing the parenting and babysitting and the brunt of the work while also taking care of newborn Truly. She says it's hard that Cody is on a honeymoon. It's different than just an anniversary trip. It's different than just going out of town. Mary says it's 11 days that they are gone together. Janelle says she doesn't know what's acceptable, but she thinks 11 days is ridiculous, to be honest. Janelle bites her tongue a lot. She bites her tongue most of the time, and she doesn't really express herself that much. So Janelle's saying it was weird for Cody to pick Robin's dress, and now hearing her say an 11-day honeymoon is ridiculous, and last season hearing her tell Cody, fuck you, is beautiful music to my ears. I don't think it's that Janelle doesn't care, but I think Cody isn't the center of her world, so she only speaks up if she thinks it's something deeply unfair. But she isn't waiting for her time with Cody, counting down every minute. Janelle says she thinks Cody has a big family and she thinks 11 days is too much. Janelle says that's where she's at and she is angry. She's having a hard time reconciling this thing that's not logical. She's totally fine with Robin. She says Robin is great and she has no problems with the marriage, and she's excited about Robin coming into the family, and yet she finds herself being so illogically angry and she doesn't get it. Janelle says she hasn't been angry or jealous or anything, and Christine stops Janelle. Cody's three wives are sitting on the confessional couch together, and Christine says, no, it is logical to be angry. Yes, it is. I love how Christine is validating Janelle and how she feels. I think Janelle is very practical and logical, and she doesn't make a lot of room for emotions or feeling too much. And if something is negative or rocks her boat, she shoves it down or compartmentalizes it. She was able to shove down her jealousy and insecurity, believing she doesn't have those. When she does, she just doesn't want to wear her hurt on her sleeve. She prides herself on being logical, and she knows to survive in polygamy, you can't humor certain emotions. But this 11-day honeymoon trip gets under her skin. It angers her, and she knows it's illogical to her, but she can't help but feel it. With Janelle, I think, in my opinion, when she has these negative emotions like jealousy or insecurity or anger, she just shoves it down and ignores it as a way to cope and function, feeling it would maybe be too much to allow herself to feel it. And so she found a way to cope, and it's staying level and detaching from those feelings and doing her best to shove them down and not acknowledge or entertain them, priding herself on being more logical than Christine or Mary, who wear their heart on their sleeve. But she likes fairness, and she has seen so many unfair things, and she detaches when it comes to her own emotions. But when it comes to the family as a whole or something deeply unfair that also affects the kids, she will speak. Like with the picking of Robin's dress, she called Cody's behavior weird. She called this 11-day trip ridiculous. She is angry, saying Cody doesn't have the time to take from his family and give to Robin solely. I think Janelle is more pissed for the kids than she is for herself, and having Cody away from his kids for almost 2 weeks and Robin getting that time exclusively when the other wives did few night trips. She sees the unfairness and what it takes from the whole family and from Cody's kids, and so she's pissed, and I don't think it's specifically about her time in the rotation that she's missing. With the C-19 mandates and the Thanksgiving meeting when Janelle told Cody, fuck you, it was because Cody was using Robin as an example of respect and loyalty openly in front of Robin and all of his wives. He was touting Robin's adult, live-in, at-home kids and Robin as an example of how they obey and how they respect him and they respect his C-19 mandates. when Cody was asking Janelle to basically kick out her adult sons because they wouldn't acquiesce and obey his rules and mandates. And he saw that as disrespect. He wanted them out. And he had no problem having Robin's adult kids stay, who are way over 18. He was happy to have them because he saw them as respectful and obedient to him. Then he acted shocked that Janelle and Christine would rather do Thanksgiving with their other adult kids out of state than slave away to do Cody's C-19 mandates to be able to attend a shitty, toxic Thanksgiving at Robin's house. Janelle speaks up less emotionally than Mary and Christine, but it's usually in times when she speaks up when there is a lot of unfairness and equal separation of time, and also when Cody's favoritism affects the kids, but not specifically when it affects her time as a wife, I've noticed. Mary says for the past year there have been so many emotions like love and acceptance and jealousy and pain, and there's just been so much. But Mary's biggest thing about them being gone 11 days for their honeymoon is her missing her husband, Cody. It's 11 days that he and Robin are gone together, and Mary doesn't get to see him. They show Cody and Robin in their Sebring convertible rental midlife crisis, cruising the streets of San Diego, joking, saying, "How you doing?" to each other, like De Niro would have done, but it's the worst impression ever in the cheesiest way possible in the midlife crisis car with the wind revealing Cody's receding hairline. Cody explains when Robin was courting him as a married man and he was a married man courting her, there's a level of intimacy that they never got into in the courtship. He's trying to say they don't get to bang and test drive the goods before marriage, and they never call sex sex. And a viewer of mine, Lisa, recently pointed it out that they always call sex intimacy to kind of, I think, shield their own feelings and make it seem less like what it is and to make it seem less real and less bad. So rather than call sex sex, they call it intimacy as like a pillow or a cushion of protection for the other wives. They want to cloak it in something sugary like intimacy rather than just call it sex. It's something I've noticed many times myself, and when the viewer brought it to my attention also, I want to also mention it and bring it to the forefront. So Robin explains that a girl coming into the family does not engage in the marriage act until they are married. Intimacy, marriage act, the thing, just call a spade, call it sex for fuck's sake. For all the sex involved and the 4 wives on rotation, they are awfully prudish about sex because if they call it sex, it becomes real to the other wives and to them, and it probably hurts even more. Sex is sex. As grown adults, you don't need to call it intimacy or the marriage act or the thing. Robin is 30 with 3 kids coming into this. Cody has a house full of 17 kids. He knows what's happening, for fuck's sake. Call it sex. Robin says when you are the last wife and you have somebody else coming in, if the husband kept his morals high with you, you will expect him to keep his morals high with her. Really, so if Cody gets a 5th wife, as Robin closes shop and gets older and older, and Cody needs another fun, exciting new wife on rotation, will she just trust Cody to do the right thing just the way they did? Or is she going to be ripping her hair out when she isn't the youngest, hottest, newest wife? Robin says there are a lot of experiences in certain areas you don't discuss and things you don't know about each other, and that's just part of the situation. She says it's this really beautiful experience of something new that you have never experienced with Cody before. Wow. So Cody said they didn't have sex before marriage. Then Robin says a girl coming into a family doesn't have sex till marriage. Then Robin says sex is a beautiful experience of something new you have never experienced with them before. And last time she mentioned the thing, when Mary mentioned equal time being something meant for a wife, unsolicitedly, very defensively, she mentioned the thing. The king and queen doth protest too much, methinks. They have said this 4 times. 1 time from Robin, another episode, 1 from Cody this episode, and twice from Robin this episode. If it was true, say it once and move on. Why repeat it over and over and over, almost defensively, trying to sell it or convince yourselves? Robin said also a 5th time, we waited 10 months. We did it all right. If they really waited, they'd clarify once and move on. There is an awful lot of talk about sex and waiting till after marriage for people who refuse to call it sex. and you wouldn't have to keep insisting that there was no sex before marriage, almost bleeding your guilty conscience everywhere in a defensive manner if this was the case that they waited until after marriage. This is even more suspicious to me, in my opinion, and it's another thing to put in the column of Robin and Cody possibly breaking that standard that the other wives upheld of no sex before marriage when they bent all of the other courtship rules, so why not this as well? Too much protesting and unsolicited doesn't bode well for them proving themselves to be virtuous. And also, one more thing. Robin always refers to grown adult women as girls, and I find that to be gross. She's 30, a damn near middle-aged woman with 3 kids, referring to herself as the girl. And she also refers to her sister wives as girls. And they're all women, and I think it's very immature, but maybe that's just a pet peeve of mine, to call girls and grown women girls. When she refers to a girl not engaging in sex till after marriage in a plural family, to me it sounds gross. It's not a girl marrying a husband with other wives. It's a grown man, and it's an adult grown woman. And call them a woman, call them a young lady, call them a fiance. Don't call them a girl. She refers to mature adult women as girls all the time. And she even refers to herself as a girl at 30 with 3 kids. I think it's very weird, but that's just my opinion. Maybe that's reflective of Robin's limited vocabulary or her maturity level. I really don't know. Cody says, as a fundamentalist Mormon culture, that wait, and he means the wait to bang, is absolutely imperative. He says that wait builds a relationship of trust. Not only does the wait for sex after marriage build a relationship of trust between himself and Robin, it builds a relationship of trust between he and his wives and Robin and all of his other wives as well, her sister wives. Cody says trust in a marriage and a relationship is the crown jewel. It's so gross. Cody is driving his midlife crisis econo rental Sebring, and Robin has his hand resting on her leg, holding it and rubbing it like a teenager compulsively glued to the object of their infatuation, and the camera keeps doing a close-up, and it's nauseating. Janelle says the rules are very strict for a married man who is courting a woman. She says from an outside perspective, coming from the mainstream Mormon LDS church, it was almost Victorian, Janelle says. Cody and Robin are walking in the Gaslamp District. It's downtown San Diego, near where all the restaurants and bars are, for those unfamiliar with the city. And Robin looks like she is dressed for 1990. She has on a white headband and a button-up shirt that's tied at the midriff, but it's worn over a long white tank top and a pumpkin orange, long, loose hippie skirt. She is wearing something that looks like it's from Chico's, which is like basically for older women, something that an older woman would wear. And Cody is wearing linen pants that look like he shopped at Tommy Bahama's or a retirement community gift shop. Anyone would know that these two are tourists dressed like that, and they aren't even dressed for the right time this was filmed or aired in. Everything style-wise is like 5 to 10 years outdated. Maybe it's a cultural thing or a Utah thing or a Robin thing, just like she uses the word duh very often. I don't know. Christine says she is much more comfortable with Cody's relationship with Robin now that Robin is married to him, but before a marriage, it's way different. Mary says it kind of sounds like they don't trust Cody, that he will go do something inappropriate. And it's not that, she says. For some reason, it's different once there is a marriage. Robin explains when they get married, they believe that they are being committed to each other for eternity, meaning Cody, herself, Mary, Janelle, Christine, and the kids will all be together forever. Well, Christine divorced Cody and she no longer believes in the faith, so she didn't get the spiritual divorce through the church. So I wonder if against her will, Christine will be forced to join Robin and Cody and Mary and Janelle and all the kids in eternity if she doesn't want that in Robin's mind. I'm sure Robin will insist in the afterlife that Christine is held against her will for eternity because it must match the picture in her head and the bullshit she posted on her vision board. Cody explains it's a spiritual bond that transcends this world, and any way you turn it, God's involved. And Robin says God is involved in all of it. He crashed their worlds together. Now Cody and Robin are using a supernatural being in the sky and a religious concept or ideology to justify what they are doing and make the pain and suffering and inequality and unfairness seem acceptable and justified. Lots of people use the idea of God and religion to do and justify heinous and hideous things that cause suffering and pain and evil. There is a show I cover on another channel, 90 Day Fiancé, and there's a show before the 90 days, and there is this predator, in my opinion, Ben, and he's 52 years old, and he preys on this 22-year-old girl, and he is a 52-year-old man, and he's a stalker, and he's very creepy and scary about the way he predates on this girl, and he has no boundaries or understanding or care for what the 22-year-old girl wants or how she feels, and he constantly is using God as a justification to stalk her and try and impose his love on her, saying he will pursue it to the bitter end because it's in God's plan. God has put her in his heart. God wants him to do this. And this is the same type of deal that we see with Cody and Robin using God and their faith to explain away their behavior. And I find a lot of people love to use God when they know there is no way to make their behavior and actions in their selfish ways or the damage that they inflict and the pain they inflict acceptable. So what they do, they know there is no way to rationally justify it. So they go to God and they use religion, knowing most people don't want to offend, and that religion and God are this untouchable thing, and that most people won't touch it or argue any further, because if they do, they might seem biased or prejudiced, or as though they are persecuting someone for their religious views, or like they're way out of line or beyond the pale if they go there. So people mention God, they bring up God, knowing that it's this untouchable thing. And I can't stand when people know what they are doing and they are very aware of what they are doing, and they use God as a way to justify their behavior and manipulate. If God exists, she doesn't like that. If there is an omnipresent supernatural entity in the sky, I really don't think she's for using her name to inflict damage and pain and a false sense of righteousness. But I digress. Back to the show. Cody says they had a serendipitous experience that told them, he and Robin, and the whole family clearly, that they belong together. Sir. No, no, no. Cody doesn't get to say just because his brain chemicals like the oxytocin and the dopamine and the serotonin are kicking in with the love and attraction of Robin, and that the two of them are love bombing each other, all googly-eyed, infatuated, and full of lust, that this was some otherworldly, supernatural, God-led experience, and then that the whole family also felt that it was godly and agreed that God is in this, so Cody and Robin must marry. No. Cody met Robin. His little brain wanted to stick it in. He was into her attraction-wise. She was exciting and fun and new, and she seemed like she would be of submissive and dependent and feed his ego, and he could lead her, and she could pop out more kids to feed his ego even more and add to his kingdom. And he decided he wanted her, and his wives could accept her or go. So they accepted her. It wasn't that as a family they all felt God sent Robin, and they all had this testimony mutually that God sent Robin. God is an excuse to make all of this palatable to viewers and as an excuse to his wives. Cody gets to say he had a testimony from God. Mary gets to say that she feels God is in this. They started the plural family structure based on faith, and the wives all at this point adhered to the faith. If Cody says God called him to Robin, and Mary, the first wife and the head bitch in charge as the legal wife, and wife number one says she has a testimony from God, the other wives will now have to accept her, or they can leave. And maybe Cody will financially assist if they do leave. But if they have kids, they're going to feel like they don't want to break up the family. They don't want to break up all their kids have ever known and change their lives and disrupt their lives and leave. And they don't feel like they can protest. They feel like under the faith, they have to accept this. They believe in the faith, and the faith finds this acceptable. So even if they don't feel like it's from God and they don't want it, do they really have an option to say no? And will they be heard if they don't feel like it's right? No. If they say no to Cody's testimony from God and Mary backing him, then they have to leave and they have to upset all of their kids. They don't want to disrupt their kids' family or upset everything their kids have ever known. So they know that leaving really isn't an option for them. So what they do is they acquiesce, they swallow the bitter pill, they accept the suffering, and they call it God and serendipity and a blessing and a testimony. And I really think a huge motivation is just the wives wanting to try and maintain the status quo and the sense of family, basically for their kids above all else, till the weight of all this is too much. Christine explains that on their honeymoon, they went for this insane long drive. They listened to Phantom of the Opera and they road tripped, which she says it was what she liked to do. She didn't want to have a plan. She wanted a road trip. She says it was perfect. On my honeymoon, I just want a bed and some room service. Fuck the road trip, sitting in a car, Phantom of the Opera. I just want lots of sex and just connecting with my husband, and maybe less than a quarter of the time at the beach or the pool or sightseeing. I think Christine knows she got less than Robin, and she doesn't want to feel bad or make it look bad, so she's trying to frame it as fun and memorable and what she wanted, when it probably isn't, as she's presenting it to be, but that's just my opinion. Mary says for her honeymoon with the king, she was sick the day after they got married. She had migraines and she was nauseous and so sick for 3 days. So they went nowhere for 3 days after they got married. Mary grew up very sheltered in the church. She was like 19 years old. I doubt she ever had sex or any experiences close to that. So maybe she was so scared or intimidated by sex that her body manifested symptoms of her sickness. And maybe that was a harbinger of doom, that this man isn't good for you. It seems like a bad omen, but I don't know. Mary says then they left after her sickness of 3 days to get to where Cody was from in Wyoming. Wow, that sounds super romantic and fair and equal to an 11-day sexcation in paradise to travel while sick to bumfuck Wyoming. The lovebirds went to Jackson Hole and they were going to go through Yellowstone. And they got part of the way there, and then they were snowed out, so they had to go the long way back up to Cody's hometown, and they barely made it in time. For Janelle's honeymoon, they were broke, so they just road tripped. Janelle says that seems to be a common theme, and that's kind of like, ugh. They took 4 or 5 days and drove back to Wyoming, to Cody's home state, and they stopped wherever they wanted. 4-day trips to Wyoming are not equal to an 11-day trip to San Diego in the honeymoon suite, with trips to the wild animal park and surf lessons, crossing things off bucket lists, downtown San Diego, the beach. This is so unfair, and it's clear favoritism. And worst of all, it's incredibly unfair to Cody's kids, who miss out on Cody's time for 2 weeks, and they miss out on 2 weeks of seeing their dad for Robin's sake, when everything in their world will change to a new normal, and no one knows what the new normal will be yet. It's very cruel and selfish and unfair to all of the wives and the kids. The wives have all of these emotions, and they had gross, shitty economy road trip honeymoons that sound like trips I would just take in college with my friends just to go see a show out of state. It doesn't sound like a honeymoon at all. And Cody and Robin are saying shit like, she's a new wife now, so now it will be okay with my wives, as if it will hurt less. And justifying this unequal treatment and unfair behavior with it being a serendipitous thing from God that the whole family knows is from God. What a pompous and preposterous bullshit thing to think. How ego-driven and selfish to say, God crashed our worlds, God did this. Some type of ultimate justification that some supernatural power in the sky led Cody and Robin together, and so it makes the suffering and cruelty okay and acceptable, and just some minor thing, something to be dismissed in comparison to God's plan. In my opinion, if God exists, God wouldn't want that suffering. And if God exists, God doesn't want to be used as some type of gross justification that makes it okay for ego-driven people to do shitty, selfish, cruel things with the excuse that it's God's plan. God led us. God wants this. It's so preposterous to me and beyond ridiculous and incredibly insensitive and selfish and dismissive to use God crashing the soulmates' worlds together as justification, as the women have to sit back and suffer to live this way. Their blessing from God is suffering and pain for 3 other women and all of the kids to some extent. Does God see their serendipitous blessing of Cody and Robin as superseding the pain and suffering of the wives and the kids? Or does God see these people as selfish and delusional, using his name as justification for doing things that clearly hurt others, making it acceptable and trying to justify it by throwing in God as if their love is bigger and God's plan is bigger and it supersedes all of the hurt and pain and suffering because they feel God is involved in their relationship. And that is greater than any of the suffering that the wives face. Fuck that. That's total bullshit in my opinion. Mary says Cody usually flies by the seat of his pants, and she thinks that's why all the honeymoons were the way they were, because Cody had this casual, lax, we'll just do whatever attitude. Now the wives are trying to rationalize Cody's different standards of honeymoons for them versus Robin, and they are trying to rationalize Cody's different levels of investment and effort in Robin's honeymoon compared to theirs by saying, oh, Cody just likes to do whatever and go with the flow. He likes to go with it with no plan. They're trying to rationalize it. But yet with Robin, everything was planned meticulously, from the honeymoon suite to the midlife crisis Sebring convertible, to the surf lessons, crossing things off their bucket list, the sightseeing, the tour at the wild animal park. Somehow Cody was able to plan everything exactly to Robin's liking and really invest. With Robin, Cody wanted to care. He wanted to be invested. He took time to plan. He flew to San Diego. He didn't do a 4-day road trip with a stop at a seedy motel and at a Wendy's to get to his hometown as the ultimate honeymoon destination in Wyoming, basically visiting his parents' house. What a great place to have tons of sex and connect, by the way. This is such bullshit in my opinion. Janelle says Cody has even said it's only been in recent years that he's actually learned how to take a vacation. More excuses and rationalizations as to why Cody did differently for Robin and her honeymoon, and she got a full-blown planned vacation with things on her bucket list in paradise, and more rationalizations as to why they got 4 or 5 day road trips to Cody's hometown and to his parents' house in Wyoming because he didn't know how to enjoy vacations before. Right, okay. The wives are really trying to grasp at straws to explain it all away, and it makes it worse. And a tight budget is no excuse after that huge wedding and the cost of Robin's rental and all of her bills and her 3 kids being absorbed into the family's finances and budget and the money getting skimmed from each wife's budget to fund her existence, and 17 kids and 4 wives, and added to that Robin's rental plus the big house, and having just the show paycheck and Janelle's job and Cody's job as the main breadwinners, there is no way money wasn't tight, like paycheck to paycheck, penny pinching mode tight. Other wives use Cody's limited budget back then as an excuse as to why they got those shitty honeymoons, but the budget is still as tight, if not even tighter, and that wasn't an excuse for Robin to not get her dream vacation. Last episode, Janelle explained Maddie's emergency appendectomy for her uninsured cost a year's wages, and she was still paying it off herself because her health insurance from her new job wasn't active yet during the emergency. So money is tight, but Cody could afford an 11-day trip to San Diego. I'm sure TLC pitched in, but I doubt they fully covered a wedding of 200 guests plus an 11-day trip to San Diego with flights, hotel, car rental, animal park tickets, and all of the other tourist attractions, 3 meals a day, surfing lessons. San Diego's a very expensive place. They covered some of it, but I'm sure they didn't cover all of it. I'm sure it's a huge expense on top of covering 20 plus people's food and shelter and bills. So when Janelle mentions that they were broke, in my opinion, at the time of their honeymoons, that's not an excuse. Janelle says Robin is getting a really different guy than Cody used to be. He's evolved so much, Janelle says. Mary says they struggled with the fact that Robin gets a bigger, better wedding reception or a bigger, better honeymoon. Mary says that struggle is there too, but at the same time, they realize that they are different people. Janelle says for her, she doesn't really think Cody would take an 11-day honeymoon. Their honeymoon was 3 days. Mary says she and Cody just celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary, and they were celebrating 20 years together, and she only got herself 3 days in Mexico for that anniversary trip. She says she wants to feel as important as anybody else in Cody's life, meaning Robin, of course. She says when she compares, and she knows she shouldn't compare because that always gets you into trouble, but when she does compare, it makes her feel not as important as Robin, like she wasn't as important to Cody for him to take that much time for her as he did with Robin. I think if Cody made a point to treat all his wives fairly and equally with everything, there would still be suffering and struggle, but there would be much less if he was showing this much more time and investment and effort and money in all of his wives rather than showing much more investment and effort and time in one wife over the others, even robbing his kids of time and money and effort to take an 11-day honeymoon. It shows you this man's priorities and what they are, and that he thinks with his dick and his ego, and that his family and his wives and his kids are easily pushed lower on the totem pole in comparison to his own wants and selfish needs. Cody comes before all of them at all costs, in my opinion. I wonder if this is in line with the faith. Cody has never surfed before, but he always wanted to since he looks like a surfer dude, he says. Just because Cody has long hair, that really doesn't mean he looks like a surfer dude at all. He looks nothing like a surfer dude at all. He is so effing delusional and egotistical and vain. He doesn't look anything like a surfer dude. He looks like a dude who thinks he looks cool in a midlife crisis, rental Sebring, and the wind keeps pushing back the hair. He's combed over in front at his temples where he's balding, and it's clinging on for dear life and desperately thin in the wind of the convertible. He's full of delusion. He's gross. His body is gross, in my opinion. His personality is gross. How vain this guy is. He has such a grandiose sense of self with little to no self-awareness. And he's just like the very bland, just like sliced Wonder Bread, white bread you find at the supermarket, or plain white rice, no culture, no flavor, nothing to redeeming intellectually or personality-wise. But Cody esteems himself very highly when the wives really do most of the heavy lifting to keep things afloat, and Cody just showboats and thinks he's winning at life. Cody is on this 11-day sexcation doing surfing and the wild animal park, while his wives back at home grasp at straws to explain why they got 3-day road trips to Wyoming as honeymoons and why he is so different with Robin, justing the excuse that Cody has evolved as a man, or they were just broke back then, or Cody just liked to fly by the seat of his pants. But the truth seems to be, in my opinion, that Robin he is invested in, and he thinks he loves her unconditionally, and he feels like he loves her, and he is pussy whipped, and he doesn't give a fuck with his other wives. He liked them fine, he had kids with them, he wanted to fulfill the faith and have a tribe for his ego as well, but now he found a wife he is actually into, who sees him as he perceives himself, and he's super attracted to her, and he gets to feel like he is saving her and her kids, like a savior or a hero doing God's work. And so, broke or not, Robin gets an 11-day stay in paradise to cross items off her bucket list, and Cody is willing to plan every detail and spend to make things perfect. There is no I'm broke excuse or I fly by the seat of my pants or that he's evolved. He feels differently for Robin than he ever did with his other 3 wives. It's not just an obligation or to fulfill the faith with Robin. He actually wants to be with her. He believes he loves her. I can't say if Cody loves her or not unconditionally. In my experience, people with narcissistic traits and tendencies can only love very conditionally, in my opinion, until they stop getting what they want from the object of their love and affection. But I believe Cody believes that he and Robin are soulmates. And I do believe that it is a different level of love and a different level of compatibility, personality-wise and communication-wise and attraction-wise, between he and Robin than Cody ever experienced with any of his other wives. Cody hasn't changed or evolved. He met a woman he will do anything to please, and he is invested in. He loves her. He wants to be there with her deeply. And it's not just as an obligation or for the faith. So Cody hasn't evolved. It's just a different type of compatibility and a different type of love and infatuation that is causing Cody to be willing to do all of the stuff the other wives never got, in my opinion. Cody says honeymooning in San Diego is a perfect time to learn how to surf, but Robin is kind of intimidated by it. Robin says it's about how deep the water will be when they are surfing, and she thinks it will be fun to try surfing, and she is willing to die trying. Cody says even before he told Robin he wanted to go surfing, she had written in her life list, she's referring to a bucket list, but she calls it a life list. As usual with Robin, everything is worded differently. But Cody had said that Robin had written in her life list that she wanted to go surfing. Everything has to be painted as this kismet, this mysterious soulmates, kismet, fate, destiny, as Robin calls it, portrayal. Like, oh, she had surfing on her bucket list and I always wanted to surf too. So does half the world. Surfing is a pretty common thing to want to try and do, to try and learn. Half the world has this on their bucket list. It's no surprise. It's actually very common. Cody wants to try it out, and it's a normal thing that most people want to try. And Robin had it on her bucket list. It's like saying, oh, I've always wanted to go to Paris or the south of France. Always wanted to go to Cannes. And you date someone and they say, oh, I've always wanted to see Cannes. Do you think logically, oh, we're soulmates, God ordained this is just kismet, I've always wanted to go to Paris, and now they want to go to France? No, most people have that dream. It's common. It's a normal thing. It's no fate or kismet or destiny, as Robin calls it. Most people have these dreams. So this is such bullshit that they're trying to paint it this way. There is a scene of Cody and Robin making out in the street in front of the surf school that sickens me. Robin always has to make everything seem like fate or kismet, like they are these epic star-crossed lovers, these epic soulmates, when it's just someone who is ego-driven and authoritative with narcissistic personality traits with another selfish, ego-driven person with some narcissistic traits and some dependent personality traits who both feed off of each other, and they get what they need from each other, and it's not a soulmate's love, in my opinion. It feels that way to them for sure, 100%, but that's not actually what it is. If Cody marries a fifth wife, if he even courts, I'd love to see how Robin handles it, and if she will still view Cody as her soulmate and as if she and Cody are destiny, as she calls it. Robin has a delusional story really reaching about how Cody asked her, do you want to go surfing? Not knowing it was on what she calls her life list. And most people, as I said, call it a bucket list. And she knew it was on her bucket list. So she said, do I ever? And she chuckled to herself, knowing it was a sign that this was fate, that this was kismet, essentially. This is, in my opinion, really grandiose and slightly delusional thinking. She said she made a list and Cody was everything on the list that she wanted in a partner. And then she said God made their worlds collide. And now Cody wanted to surf. Unbeknownst to him, that was on her life list. So all this must be destiny and ordained by God because it rationalizes all the suffering that they caused to the other wives in Robin's mind and in Cody's mind. And it seems to make it all better, like a bandage on a boo-boo. Cody is in his wetsuit without it on, and he has it pulled down, and he has his chest puffed out, and he's flexing like a bodybuilder. And honestly, to me, he looks like he's constipated or about to have a seizure. He doesn't have huge man boobs, but in my opinion, he has a dad bod. And Robin comes out laughing, asking what he is doing as Cody mimics flexing. And Robin tells cameras, oh, by the way, everything they said was true. And she says it's hilarious. She's dying because when Cody's wives gave her the Cody survival kit, the first thing they told her was that Cody is always flexing in the mirror. Of course he is. He's so fucking ego-driven and narcissistic when there's nothing to write home about. He flexed in the mirror, looking at himself, asking Robin, I'm bigger, right? Do I look bigger to you? Men who are super into their muscles and lifting usually have baby dicks, in my opinion. And Cody looks like he has a dad bod. He's not attractive. He looks like a middle-aged man trying to get through a midlife crisis and come to terms with the fact that he's aging. And rather than accept it and focus on wisdom and consciousness, he becomes increasingly more egotistical, and more into his body and outside appearance, which no matter what he does will slip away as he ages. So he should stay fit. It's good to stay healthy. But his main focus should really be on his kids and his wives, and on his declining mental state and level of maturity and emotional intelligence, and his declining self-awareness as well. Cody's wives are taking all the kids on a picnic while Cody is away. Inside, they probably feel like their hearts have been through a meat grinder, but they're getting up and taking the kids to do something fun for the family while Cody is having his midlife crisis sexcation with Robin without a care in the world. No wonder Cody can't give these women what they deserve. He doesn't deserve them. How could he? These women, Mary, Janelle, and especially Christine, are the heart of the family and the ones who make everything good for all of the kids. And without all of their hard work and personal sacrifice and suffering, there wouldn't be enough finances or food or love or nurturing. These women have to set aside their own personal struggles and suffering inherent with the lifestyle in order to nurture and raise these kids. And all of the Brown kids are very intelligent and responsible and mature and self-aware, hardworking adults from what we see. And that credit goes to Christine and Janelle and even Mary, who made it possible for the kids to thrive despite all of Cody's flaws and deficiencies as a father and a husband. And I find that to be really remarkable and really selfless of Cody's original three wives. And it's something to really admire, especially in Christine and Janelle, and even to some degree Mary. The teenage girls aren't excited about going on this picnic. I was a feisty, raging bitch when I was a teenager. I would not want to be in a room with myself back then, so I can only imagine. Janelle says anything they suggest, of course, the teenage girls aren't down for. They think it's not fun. Maddie complains that they're going to picnic in the mountains. From my perspective, these kids are lucky that the wives are even able to get up every morning of this nearly 2-week honeymoon period away from Cody, their husband, knowing that their man is banging the shiny new favorite wife for 11 nights and days in paradise, and the wives miraculously are able to function normally, let alone take all of the kids on a picnic in the mountains. But most teenage girls can't really think that deeply about others or have the level of understanding and compassion that would be necessary for to really comprehend something like this. It comes with the territory, of course, of being a teenager. I'd say so. I don't blame her at all for her attitude, but these women have superhuman strength to really be able to go out and do this and organize it with smiles on, knowing what their husband is up to. Also, just a style note, Maddie looks a little bit ridiculous. She has a do-rag on and a 90s style beaded necklace. I feel like maybe Utah is stuck in time because at the time of filming, Maddie's style is already very outdated. Janelle grabs a Red Bull saying she will have some caffeine just so she's a good mom. I thought caffeine was off limits in their faith, but maybe that's an optional choice. I would need more than caffeine to have the fortitude to deal with my feelings and emotions, let alone taking all of the kids to an excursion, a picnic in the mountains, and plan all of that only to have them be ungrateful for it. Janelle says it's been an up and down week for her emotionally, up and down. She says in a lot of ways, she perceives any time Cody spends with Robin as cutting into their time. It's not just a false perception. It's correct. This nearly 2-week honeymoon that diverges from what the other wives got in their experience with Cody also infringes on the equal time the wives and kids deserve and should rightfully expect from Cody as a husband and father. And it was unfair and cruel, and it was a very unfair and cruel sacrifice for Robin and Cody to expect the wives to make as well. I would never feel comfortable in Robin's shoes, personally going away for that long, knowing especially that the other wives feel insecure about the new normal and what it will be, knowing that Cody's other wives could really use that time with their husband. Also more so that I'm taking Cody as a father away from his kids for almost 2 weeks when they're at very young ages to have an unneeded sexcation. Also, didn't Robin say recently that Ari can't be away for her dad for more than, she doesn't like it to be more than 2 days or something like that, she said? or else Ari gets really anxious and Saul doesn't like it, so they don't like Cody to be away for more than a couple days, a few days, like 2 days. But she was willing to take Cody away from all of his kids for 11 days straight. So that's something to think about there. Why couldn't she go for 3 days on a road trip as the other wives got? So it was less of a burden and sacrifice on Cody's wives and kids who desperately need reassurance and the extra security and stability of Cody as a husband being around at this time. More than ever, when everyone is anxious about this unknown new normal, this unknown new dynamic and what it will be. All they know is nothing will ever be as it was as they like things. It will be different, and they don't know what the changes with Robin coming into the family will mean, and they get the added cruelty and anxiety of waiting 11 days in limbo before being able to even try to adjust to what will be. It's a time where if Cody and Robin were really all about the family, they would insist to be there, and Robin would insist that Cody's wives and kids would need him for security and reassurance at this time more than ever. But they aren't really all about the family at all. Cody even says this season his wives are obstacles to his goals. His kids, his families, everything the wives suffered for is an obstacle to Cody's goals, what he wants. One has to ask what Cody's goals are, what are his intentions, and what were always his intentions from the start. After Janelle says she perceives any time Cody spends with Robin as cutting into their time, she says it's the fact that Cody is focused somewhere else for 11 days and on one particular person for 11 days. That frustrates Janelle, and rightfully so. Let me ask this. When did any one of Cody's kids or other wives get 11 days straight, 24/7 of presence and connection and intimacy and emotional closeness and communication with Cody as a father or a husband? When did that ever happen in the Brown family with Cody and anyone from his family previous to this? Never. Just with Robin, and she gets something none of his kids ever got and none of his wives ever got. 24/7 full presence and attention and communication and intimacy, one-on-one with no interruptions, with no other wives, with no other kids around. When has that ever happened for Janelle, Christine, or Mary, his other wives, or any of his kids? Robin got more than his other wives ever got, or any one of his kids. Is this fair and equal treatment? And is this acceptable in the eyes of the faith as to how polygamy should be lived? At this point in the show, they were still adherents of the faith, and Cody and Robin make a huge hoopla over the faith and no sex before marriage, and that they had a longer courtship of 10 months versus 60 to 90 days, and they did it all by the book. Is this experience of one wife getting 24/7 uninterrupted time for 11 days straight with a husband with no interruptions from kids or other wives, just one-on-one time as if it's monogamy or a monogamous honeymoon? Is this acceptable per the faith and the way polygamy should be lived? Robin said God is in this. Cody too. He said it was serendipitous. God led him. So since this is really about honoring the faith under the fundamentalist Mormon faith, is this trip of 11 days of being in monogamy, fully present with no other wives and kids, acceptable if it cuts from the other equal rotation and time with the wives, and it's unequal treatment and unfair, and it shows favoritism, and it takes away from the time with the kids? 11 days of fully focused attention on one person. Is that acceptable per their faith as the way polygamy should be lived? And is this acceptable also considering that the wives got 3 to 4 day road trips to Cody's parents' house in Wyoming for their honeymoons? If this is God leading them, ordained by God, does this 11-day honeymoon trip and everything they insist was done by the book the right way, also the right way by the book in accordance with the faith? Cody and Robin have not a care in the world. Now they are getting their surf lessons, and they did everything by the book. And Robin's a new wife now, so they aren't open to any complaints or the incessant whingings and whinings that any of the other wives do any longer, because now God has ordained it. And without a care in the world, They're crossing surfing off their life list. The peasants are back in Lehigh. They're all piling into cars. And Mariah makes a snarky comment saying the faster we work, the faster we get there, the faster we leave. Mary lets the cameras know it's such an ordeal to get that many people packed up to go on a stupid little picnic. Now, Mary seems very unenthusiastic. Mariah is totally not loving going to this picnic. Like mother, like daughter, I guess. Robin says, when the waves hit her, she thought she would die. They're back surfing and she's being dramatic, like she's never swam in the ocean ever in her life. One trick is that I'm sure everybody knows, if there's a strong rip current, you can swim parallel to the shore to be sure to be safe and like try to escape it. Robin says she might die, but she doesn't care. She will die trying because this is on her life list. And if you can't die doing your life list, then what can you die for? This sounds so dumb. She wants to seem cool and edgy and brave, but she looks like an ungrateful idiot. She won't die. The surf instructor is right there, first of all, with them. Plus, there are lifeguards there, and there are people in life who never get to do a thing that they wish they could do, or even have a life list, or have a vision board at all, ever. And some people die because of war, cancer they didn't ask for, in a freak car accident. So saying something that sounds so cool and edgy, like if you can't die for your life list, then what can you really die for? It sounds so stupid and out of touch and just frivolous and empty. It makes her look even more foolish and tone deaf than she is by her nature. I mean, if that's even possible. Robin says it's a rush. Cody says if he gets the hang of surfing or not, he doesn't care. He's married, man. And that was the most important thing to him, he says. I wonder if they were allowed sex before marriage, if they would have wanted to marry so much. Cody is doing handstands on the beach to showboat for cameras, and Cody lifts Robin up over his head, trying to do like Patrick Swayze did with Jennifer Grey in Dirty Dancing, where there's an iconic scene where he holds her above him when they're practicing the lift in the water. May Swayze rest in peace. I loved that movie as a kid, and nobody puts baby in the corner. But what's funny with that is she was in the movie seated just like against a wall. She wasn't even in the corner during that scene. And it always drove me nuts that baby was never really seated in a corner. She's just seated against a wall. And I know that it's just a figure of speech, but that's an iconic line. How hard would it have been to actually seat Jennifer Grey in the actual corner to make it make more sense? Anyways, Cody walks off with Robin, lifted over his head and her screaming like a teenager. Was he so touchy-feely and flirtatious with Janelle and Christine and Mary on their honeymoons? So Cody and Robin are headed to the San Diego Wild Animal Park, and the TLC intern needs to get fired that spelled San Diego wrong. There is endless footage of Cody and Robin swaying and hugging with their cheeks touching, hugging and kissing like full body, minutes-long embraces, and kisses in the middle of a place where families go. But these people yet can't call sex sex. It's the marriage act or intimacy. But they're almost dry humping at a tourist attraction meant for families. Robin points out pretty flowers, and Cody says he never bought her flowers. And there's a third scene of them again swaying and embracing in the animal park meant for kids. Why don't they do everyone a favor, hop in the Sebring, head back to their hotel, and bang like they want to in private, instead of embracing a million times for minutes on end, making out in public places meant for families? Gross. They take a tour to see the animals that are roaming free as if they were in the wild, and the tour guide is alone with them on this open tour bus. And she says the animals have been successful reproducing in the wild setting. And she says since the two of them are on their honeymoon, she thought she would make the tour special and theme it all about courtship. But she doesn't know that these two come from a family of polygamists. She just knows that they just got married. They're newlyweds. Anyways, Robin says the tour guide didn't know that they were polygamists, and it was very cute and informative, the tour. Cody says it kept dawning on him that the animal kingdom is very polygamous in its nature. Anything to justify his lifestyle as normal, and it's so normal, it's so natural that even animals are able to do it, and those women, those female lions don't get jealous. They love it. This is good. So the animals are able to do it, so it's not that bad for the humans. This is such a natural thing. It's such a good thing. Anything to make his lifestyle seem normal and healthy and natural and organic. Anything to justify his lifestyle as natural and normalize it. And finding it in nature and saying, look at this example. To him, he feels more justified in what he's doing. The tour guide explains that in nature, female rhinos will have other best girlfriends who have babies with the mate of the initial female rhino. Cody says the girl rhinos like to hang out and they only use the males for ... obviously meaning sperm donations, but Cody couldn't say that because it would be so off color and inappropriate. The guide affirms Cody's conclusion. She explains that all three females are facing one direction, hanging together, and the male is facing the other direction. The male is referred to as the breeding bull, and he is often solitary unless a female from the group is in breeding condition. The tour guide explains that if they just put one female and male together, the females shut down reproductively, and then once there are several women, the male is then happy to have a bunch of females cycling so he can do his job of basically sperm donation. Cody asks if it all happens at the same time, if all of the female rhinos cycle at the same time. And the tour guide affirms, yes, just like humans. Cody and Robin are absolutely tickled by all of this. And I'm sure that they think that all of this is a sign from God. When they go to the wild animal park and they found out that some of the animals have like some type of polygamous cycle going where they have different female mates, that, oh my God, or like mini female partners to reproduce with, that, oh my God, it's just like us. This is a sign from God, basically. I'm sure that's how they're taking it. As most people know, if a bunch of women are going to be around each other a lot, or if a bunch of female roommates live in the same house, their cycles typically will sync up. It's actually true. Cody jokes. He says it sounds like hell. He says he was giggling to himself the whole time, like he can relate to the rhino system. The tour guide says it's maybe not so different from the human world of us girls sticking together. And Cody's response is, you don't even know. Back in Utah at the beautiful river nature park with the mountains and the rivers and the water, it's beautiful. It's in the Wasatch Mountains, Utah, and there are beautiful falls. It looks like rapids. It looks gorgeous. It looks earthy. The wives have prepped all the food and condiments for grilling, but Logan is expected to grill as the man holding down the fort in Cody's absence. He asked where the wood was so that he can grill, but the wives forgot to bring it. Christine says it's a relief how well all of the kids are getting along with each other, meaning basically how well Robin's kids and the Brown kids get along. Janelle says she didn't know what to expect, but it's been easy. She says maybe because the Brown kids are the same age as Robin's kids, that's why. And Mary says the kids have all been really accepting of each other, all of them, all 16. She says they all love each other and they're all happy to have each other. Back at the animal park meant for families and tourists, Cody and Robin are constantly still hugging and swaying every couple steps they take and making out. And they're acting like they just took some Molly or ecstasy, like teenagers who take a little Molly, take a little ecstasy, they get all lovey-dovey, touchy-feely, with the level of PDA from two grown adults. It's really gross and insensitive at a family attraction to impose your displays of love on other people, on others, especially at places for tourists and families. Just get in your car, go to your room, dry hump and sway there, not at the animal park. Gross. They head to the zipline area of the park after their tour of the wild animal enclosures of open spaces. And Robin says yes, excitedly. And the way she says yes, she's like, yes. And she reminds me of Napoleon Dynamite, just the way that she says yes and her gestures. It's hilarious. And I don't know why, but the minute she did that, she looked so just like nerdy and dorky and awkward. And it just reminded me so much of Napoleon Dynamite. Robin says she was scared and Cody wasn't scared of ziplining. And Cody said maybe when they go skydiving, he'll be scared, but he has 4 wives and nothing scares him but poverty. Mary says she would love to zipline. Christine says it would make her absolutely ill, and she admits she's a chicken though. Not surprising. This woman, and I think Christine, she's like one of my favorites, but she said she wasn't that into ziplining. And we know that she said before, more toasters kill people than sharks every year. So she refuses to have a toaster in her house. But yet she put bread in her oven to toast, and she burnt it so bad that there was like smoke coming out of the oven, and it almost started a house fire, like legitimately. So I'm kind of not surprised by the fact that Christine doesn't want to zip line, and it's no big thing. I mean, so next, Cody mentions that there's a lion, and the lion has a pride, and the lion has multiple female partners, of course. And Cody says he doesn't know how many mates the lion had, but he has more than one female mate. And Cody asks, are you suggesting that lions are natural polygamists like man? Ha ha ha. And he laughs at this. He's tickled by this. But this is really like the most unnatural thing in the world to ask anybody of any sexuality or walk of life, for them to accept you having multiple spouses with one central partner allowed for multiple partners, but those multiple partners of that one central partner have to deal with it, and they have to deal with all the other partners and all the feelings that come with that, but they're not allowed to have multiple partners themselves. It's unreal, and it might happen in nature, but just because it happens in nature, it doesn't mean that in a human condition it would be an acceptable or a healthy lifestyle necessarily. It's not funny, yet Cody finds it adorable to, every chance he gets, try and normalize polygamy, crack jokes about it, and suggest it's natural to humans when it's not. Cody jokes that this lion only has 2 female partners, and he is just getting started. He ain't got nothing on Cody. Didn't Cody say last episode this wasn't about his ego or narcissism or having many women, and now as his wives suffer back home, he is jokingly open that he outdoes this male lion in the wife counting department or in the partner department, and he has more female partners than him. Ego much? This is totally about ego for Cody, or he wouldn't even joke like that. Does he know what his wives suffer as a result of him having multiple wives when they're only allowed him to center their world around? What a dick, in my opinion. Back in Utah, Janelle explains that usually Cody handles the family's barbecuing needs. But since Cody is off on his honeymoon with Robin, Logan stepped in and handled it. Mary mentions how Logan has really stepped up being the oldest child. He takes control and takes charge. Christine says since Cody isn't around right now, it's really nice that the wives have Logan to step in. See what a beautiful job these women have done with the kids despite Cody's performance as a father and husband. Without these wives Cody disrespects and neglects and disregards and manipulates, there is no way in hell his kids would have turned out so amazingly. All the credit goes to Christine and Janelle and Mary even. It's a shame Robin was not able to be more sensitive to the needs of Cody's other wives and kids in taking this 11-day sexcation, taking Cody away from his wives and kids 24/7 for one-on-one time that Cody was unable to ever give any of his wives or kids for 11 days straight. Just Robin was able to receive that type of presence and consecutive time from Cody for so long and that level of investment, just as one would find in a typical monogamous relationship. Christine says Logan is an almost adult male and they treat him as such. Janelle agrees that part of it is that they treat their kids like young adults. They expect their kids will act like young adults. They expect that they will be responsible. They try to balance that with them going out and hanging with friends. They can't be expected to be completely adults since they are teenagers after all. Aurora took Peyton's chair and he asks his mom to get her off his chair. Aurora seems to have stolen Peyton's spot and she finds it acceptable to sit wherever she likes. And she tells Peyton that there are other spots he can sit in, and he tells her, same to you. He liked the spot he was in. Logan told Peyton to chill and let Aurora keep his spot. I think Aurora should learn that she doesn't get to feel entitled to take other people's spots, but I also understand that she's the younger child. She's probably like 5, and Peyton is older, and there are other places to sit, and she was parented much differently than the Brown kids, clearly. Logan tells Peyton there's another spot over there, and Peyton says it was his spot Aurora basically stole, and Logan tells Peyton, deal with it. Logan says it's almost too much power. He can't handle this. Christine says Peyton picks on the girls, and she feels on one hand they are integrating well because Peyton is treating Robin's girls just like he treats his own sisters. Christine says she knows that's horrible, but it's like Aurora is a true sister now being picked on. That was Christine's perspective. Janelle calls it equal opportunity picking. Mary says it's no secret. She and Cody, they've had their serious issues, and she wonders if that's why she wants to focus on Cody, because she and Cody need to focus on each other. Mary says she needs to focus on Cody and he needs to focus on her so they can make themselves better as a couple. Mary says when she and Cody's relationship is better, her relationship with her sister wives is better, and Christine and Janelle agree. Mary says seriously, when she is mad at Cody or when she and Cody are having issues, she detaches from everybody and everything, including her sister wives, Christine and Janelle, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with the family. Janelle tells Mary she has been so impressed because she has never heard Mary speak so logically about her relationship ever, as much as she has in the last 2 months. That was big of Janelle to praise and validate Mary, especially considering all of the past history between them. As we know, Mary and Janelle had a fraught relationship from the start, with Janelle coming into the family, and Mary wanted things done a specific way, her way. She was very rigid and judgmental and inflexible with Janelle. Janelle says, wow, Mary, that's great insight. And she says Mary never used to be like that, so now she's at a loss for words. And Christine jumps in and she tells Mary that she is evolving so well. So Mary asks Janelle and Christine if they can validate her for wanting her life to center around Cody. Janelle validates Mary and Christine as well. Janelle tells Mary that's also where she's at now. And Christine asks, really? She seems surprised. Janelle says, yeah, it's weird. She was detached for years and years. Mary says she has felt that Janelle has always been a lot more independent, which is good. Janelle says she has always been less needy, and Mary acknowledges she has always been more needy. Christine says she's been right there in the middle. Back to the sexcation in San Diego, Cody and Robin sit to eat at the heart of downtown San Diego in their ridiculous clothes, holding hands. Cody reflects that so far they have had a lot of fun on the honeymoon, and they have done some things that they wanted to be able to do together. They have been able to spend time just talking and not worry about when Cody has to be home. Robin mentions doing the little things that you can't do unless you're married, like brushing your teeth together and things like that. First of all, I hate brushing my teeth with someone else next to me in the bathroom beside me. It's a weird pet peeve of mine. Second of all, you can totally do that, married or not. It would make no difference. You could totally, like most normal people, have a boyfriend, have sex on the regular like normal people. There is nothing wrong with that. You don't have to be married to brush your teeth next to someone in the morning. I think that was really ridiculous. And obviously that's not even what she's really referring to. You can totally brush your teeth, married or not. That little thing is not exclusive to married couples. So I thought it was so funny that she mentioned it. If Robin means the things you can't do unless you're married, for fuck's sake, don't say brushing your teeth. Be honest. Say you get to finally have sex all day long, and that's what you've been waiting to do, and you wait until marriage, customarily under your faith, under your lifestyle, under your culture, and that's what you're waiting to do. That's the thing you're excited about doing that you can't do before you're married. It has brushing teeth. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's what it is. Just say what it is. These two are like watching paint dry, with Cody saying, we can talk endlessly without me worrying about going home. And Robin saying things like, we get to do things we couldn't do before marriage, like brushing our teeth. What the fuck? paint drying would be more fun watching paint dry than these two. These two are unbelievable. These two will admit anything but the truth. That they went to Pound Town and that's what they've been doing. That's why they went for 11 days. That's the activity they are both excited to do as a married couple. It's like so ludicrous talking about, oh, we get to talk endlessly without me having to go home. Oh, I get to brush my teeth next to him. Jesus, Jesus Christ, give me a fucking break. Robin says it is very difficult to express how the honeymoon has been because of the fact that they have 3 beautiful women at home that love Cody besides her. Oh, now, when it's convenient, they will feign sensitivity to the other wives, when before, Cody was joking that the lion who had 2 female partners has nothing on him, ha ha, lol, but it's all about sensitivity to his wives, because they cared so much that when they hugged endlessly and did PDA and making out in the middle of the street, knowing cameras were on them, practically dry humping in the family-friendly animal park, on camera, knowing TLC is going to show that footage and his wives will see it, there was no issue to sensitivity. They couldn't just save it for the hotel. They made out on camera in the street many times, knowing the wives would see, so they don't give a fuck clearly at all. Anyways, Cody says it's all about sensitivity. Sure, that's why Robin gets an 11-day trip to paradise, and each of the other wives got 3-day road trips to Cody's parents' house because he's so sensitive, and Robin as well. This is some fuckery and bullshit, please. Cody says it's all about sensitivity. It's something they always have to take into consideration, like the concern about other people's feelings with this lifestyle. Cody says he spent his time being insensitive, and it's not cool. So he is just always trying to be better. Cody knows the way he behaves and he treats his wives, and he knows that the disparity is wrong. He is doing this willingly, in full awareness of how it hurts his wives, with the excuse that he'll try to be better when he just gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on, because Cody doesn't give a fuck. Janelle says when Cody gets to the end of the vacation, he thinks of going home usually, and he's nervous about how his reception will be when he goes home to his wives, when he's off with another wife, basically. Mary says, the way Cody puts it, he says he knows he is up against mental landmines when he comes home, and it freaks him out. Janelle confirms that Cody does sometimes run into emotional landmines, and he never knows where they are coming from. Mary acknowledges he does, and she tries to give Cody the advice that if he will just take the time with each of his wives and help them fill their emotional bank accounts a little bit, it would be better. Christine says it's absolutely stinking ridiculous that it matters so much. She hates the fact that she thinks, when is Cody going to be around? The women are almost trained to discount their wants and needs and insecurities and to dismiss them as irrational or qualities to hate, qualities that are inferior when they are natural and should be validated. And a wife should want their husband around and present, and it's not stupid to feel like it matters to want him present and around. It's not stupid or ridiculous to feel that at all, and it's not a weakness at all. Cody just gave Robin more than he ever gave his other wives, and all they are asking for is just a little bit of that full presence to feel as though they matter as much as Robin does, and to feel as though Cody is as invested with them. And the wives already sense the disparity between their relationships to Cody and Robin's relationship with Cody, and the level of investment that Robin gets from Cody and the level of investment Cody gives to his other wives, the level of investment they're receiving from him. And they know they get less. They feel it. It's so blatantly obvious, and Cody makes it obvious. Does the faith allow for this, I wonder, in how they describe polygamy should be lived? Christine says it's ridiculous to always wonder when Cody will be around. And Mary tells Christine it's not ridiculous. She tells Christine she needs to have that bond and connection with Cody. Christine realizes that, but she would like to be a heck of a lot more independent, she says. I'd say Christine has grown a lot, and she is now divorced and probably the most independent of all of Cody's wives. Christine says when she sits there and thinks, oh, I miss him, he's not here too much, it's ridiculous. She doesn't mind thinking that a little bit, but too much is ridiculous. That's what Christine is saying about herself, that she thinks it too much, that it's ridiculous. I feel like the women are taught that their emotions and the way that they feel about this is all weakness and that they'll overcome it and be stronger and that this is their problem, basically, and their weakness in them when it's not. It's a natural human emotion to feel this way. They deserve better. It's natural for them to want equal at the very least. And especially when the husband provides such a disparity in the level of time he spends with each wife and the level of investment he shows. I mean, she's not thinking about it too much. It's not ridiculous the way these women feel jealous or insecure or wonder when Cody will be there next, that they have their whole world revolving around Cody. This is not ridiculous for her to feel this way, but she believes it is, probably because it's ingrained in her that this is some type of weakness when it's a natural human emotion and she should have it and it should not be discounted. And I like that the wives are at least validating it somewhat with each other. Mary tells Christine it's not like that. And it's not like Christine focuses on it constantly. She says she doesn't think any of the three of the wives have been doing that, like obsessing over Cody, thinking about him all the time, thinking when he'll be there next. Christine says it's not that their world revolves around Cody in any way, but it sounds like it a little bit. It doesn't just sound like it a little bit. It totally revolves around Cody. Everything revolves around Cody completely, in my opinion, for the wives. Seeing Cody, their time with Cody is their oxygen, other than with Janelle, perhaps, in my opinion. They need that time. They are waiting for that time, like craving it, starving for it when they get it. And Cody just throws them crumbs like it's an obligation for him to grace the wives with his presence, when they can sense, like with Robin, he's all in, fully invested. He wants to be there out of love. He personally wants to be there. It's not an obligation. They can sense that, and they wait for their little crumbs, like their oxygen from Cody, other than Janelle, I would say. Mary says Cody is totally the glue that holds the family together. That aged like milk. Wow. Recently, Cody said his wives are obstacles to his goals, as his behavior has become more and more manipulative and abusive and neglectful and less stable and secure. And the family has totally disintegrated as a result of this. And the dynamic that is left is a skeleton of what it once was pre-Robin, withered and frayed. And I'm not saying that it was ever perfect. I'm not saying that it was ever ideal or the healthiest way to live, but I just think that before Robin came into the family, the women, yes, still had huge problems living polygamy, huge problems in their marriages, but I think that they were adjusted to the status quo and they were comfortable. There was less jealousy to deal with. There was a little less insecurity and competition. And Cody basically had the equal, I would say he split his time equally, and he had an equal level of investment with each wife. He may have seen it as an obligation to do all of his responsibilities with the wives, but he had the same level of like dismissive investment with each of them. He may have even had more investment. There was more, I would say, chemistry or sexual attraction. I'm pretty sure he was more intimate with his wives. When Robin came in, I mean, it all changed completely. And Cody, as the wives voiced more and more and more displeasure, Cody basically would just cut them off and try to manipulate and neglect them and withhold intimacy, withhold communication, withhold affection, emotion, presence, as a way to basically punish the wives and change the way that they behave, because he was no longer being worshipped and provided an ego feast every time that he was at their house, in my opinion. Cody is the center, and as Cody's behavior got worse and worse as he increasingly seems to prefer monogamy with Robin, the whole fabric of the family structure has changed and devolved into an ever more toxic sludge, in my opinion. Mary says Cody is the glue that holds the family together. She asks, why not have the world revolve around him? Christine says because it's got to revolve around something else. Janelle says she thinks that level of how your life revolves around Cody sort of changes. She says when she has new babies, Cody is way up here somewhere, and she lifts her hand way above her head in the highest position. Mary says Christine has a new focus, and Christine acknowledges, yes, she has newborn Truly. Mary says Cody also has his new focus, which would be Robin, of course, the new female to breed. I think Cody, when he has a baby with a wife, is present and involved. And once that's done, he really kind of loses interest as the babies grow up. And Robin is the new baby maker on the scene to grow his tribe. This is so disturbing to me. As the wives grapple with trying not to admit their sense of well-being and stability is reflective of how much attention Cody gives them and how much he makes them feel they matter to him. Because their whole world is defined by Cody. It revolves around him. And Janelle explains he revolves a lot when you have babies, but as the babies grow, it shifts. And we see Robin and Cody, and they're in a pedicab in downtown San Diego, having the time of their life. Mary says she and Robin did have a little conversation about when he and Mary were in Mexico, and she kind of felt bad that Cody didn't call her. She says, you feel bad because you want to desperately somehow connect with him. And that phone call is how you connect. Robin says she insisted that Cody call his wives on their honeymoon. How gracious and loving when she is the only wife who ever got such an extensive period of one-on-one time and attention and focus and investment 24/7 for 11 days straight, one-on-one soulmates time when no one else in the family ever got that level of connection, attention, investment, presence from Cody. No one else, none of his kids, none of his other wives got that. And now Robin wants to act like Mother Teresa, insisting he call his wives. How gracious. Cody said he would take a couple days before contacting them. He basically wanted to put it off a little. And Robin said no. She thinks he should contact his wives right away. How sensitive and generous of the queen. Christine says Robin has made a point to have Cody call home more. And Christine says Cody has talked to her for longer conversations than he ever has when he's ever on vacation with another wife ever. That's their husband, and they're acting like it's such a privilege and a prize that he is contacting them and talking to them for a longer conversation than usual. WTF. This is so fucked up. He's their husband and the father of their kids, and they're getting excited that they get a 10-minute phone call instead of a 5-minute phone call at Robin's urging. Mary asks, oh really? At the revelation that Christine is now getting longer phone calls from Cody. I guess she wasn't getting the long conversations from Cody, but maybe Robin made Cody appease Christine because she was most upset about her joining the family, considering the kiss at the engagement and how Christine reacted to that, because that was different standards than the other wives got waiting to kiss Cody at the altar. And we also know that Christine got very upset. She was most upset about the wedding dress fiasco. Robin is very calculating. She knows Christine as the third wife and the newest wife and the youngest wife will be the hardest to win over now that she's basically replacing her as the newest, hottest wife. Will be the hardest one to win over, and she already fucked up with her more than once, so she probably directed Cody to make those longer calls. I can't believe they are sitting there acting very impressed that Cody is calling and staying on the phone for longer when he should be doing this. This is total bullshit, in my opinion. It's as if they feel like they don't deserve it and like, oh, wow, he's glorifying us with a phone call. Janelle wants to interject that these new phone calls with Cody aren't all about Robin, in her view. In other words, Robin isn't the motivation for this new change in behavior in Cody. And Mary agrees with Janelle. She thinks Cody is growing himself and is improving himself. So this is all coming from self-improvement and from self-growth. These women are deluding themselves, reaching to try and normalize this and feel better about it, as if the crumbs they get from Cody are better than before or enough or what they would even deserve. This is really ridiculous, and these women deserve better, in my opinion. Mary insists Cody is growing himself and it's not all Robin behind that. Well, he is suddenly doing a new behavior at Robin's urging. She just made it clear he should call, and he did not from himself call. It was at Robin's urging that he called. So it really is all Robin, and it isn't out of a love or a want to call, but it's a form of manipulation, and it's also doing it out of obligation. He doesn't really want to be doing it, I don't think. Robin says when you're in this situation, sometimes your emotions, even though logically there is just no way because Cody is such a good and honorable man, but your emotions sort of get the better of you and you start creating this crazy thing in your head. And if Cody can contact them, his wives, and say, hey, I love her, I'm on a honeymoon with her, but I still love you and I still connect with you and I'm still thinking about you, it helps the other wives to feel more secure. Robin, as a woman, understands and knows how the other women feel. And basically, it's not coming from Cody to want to reassure his wives, to want to tell them, I love you, I'm connecting with you because I'm making a 5-minute phone call, I'm thinking about you, even though all I'm doing on this 11-day sexcation is banging my new wife. She's directing him to say it. It's not even coming from him. So it's not even really genuine. It doesn't really mean anything. They're just doing it to try and cushion the emotions and make it less bad and offer crumbs to try to make it better emotionally on the wives and not have to hear about it, as if, look, we're doing the right thing here. We know how painful this is, so we're going to do the right thing and call. It's an obligation. It's not actually from his heart. It's at Robin's urging as a manipulation. Janelle says this week has been a hard week and her emotional swings have been way off the scale. She insists it's not jealousy. She loves Robin and she is so excited still. It is jealousy, in my opinion, and it's okay to admit it and feel it. It isn't a weakness to feel jealousy that your husband is off having a sexcation with a new wife. It's okay to feel. It's not a weakness, and it's not just the wife's problem. This is on Cody as well, to have done things more fairly and equally. And this is also about Cody making a point to give Robin the exact same standards and levels of investment as the other wives got from Cody. But Robin seems to get a lot of different standards from Cody. She gets different standards, different rules. She gets a larger wedding reception and a longer, more expensive honeymoon. And that disparity makes it worse. And the women are told when they complain about how they feel that they signed up for this, that this is in the religion, that any emotions or insecurities as a result of the lifestyle or faith are their issue alone to deal with. It's no one else's problem but theirs. It's because they're weak. It's because they have insecurities. And this faith and living this way is going to make them a better person. I think it's really sad how much the wives have to suffer, in my opinion. Cody isn't accountable or responsible to even ponder what it might feel like. He is unwilling. And the wives are taught it's their weakness and deficiency to feel how they do, and that this suffering will make them stronger and better when it just isn't the case. And these women deserve better, at the very least, for Cody to do things fairly and equally across the board with all his wives, rather than showing blatant favoritism from day one to one particular wife. This is so sad to watch. These women try to rationalize accepting less than they deserve, and for Cody to knowingly give less and make them feel it's their issue and their weaknesses and their deficiencies. And they signed up for this. It's their issue, their problem, not his whatsoever. He knows he does things unequally across the board, and he knows that he shows favoritism. He knows it's unfair, and he doesn't give a fuck. He just does what he wants everyone to swallow their bitter pills, but he refuses to uphold his end of even trying to be fair and equal across the board as the husband. These women deserve more, in my opinion. Janelle says she loves Robin and she's so excited still, but she was just really, really angry with Cody for the first few days, and she has no idea why, and so she will be really candid and say this hasn't been a good week for her. Janelle, in my opinion, is being candid that the week hasn't been a good one. But she knows exactly why she is pissed at Cody, and she just refuses to admit those feelings in herself or validate them. And that's her coping mechanism. That's how she deals with things. Cody says he thinks It was yesterday. He took an hour and he called everybody and talked to them for a little bit. The day before, though, Cody couldn't get a hold of Janelle. And Janelle admits she ignored Cody's calls for 3 days till he called her 5 or 6 times in a row. And she took his call and he said all the right things because he has grown up so much in 2 years. Janelle says Cody never would have known to say those things to her 10 years ago, and it was all better after he just said the right things to her. Cody may know all the right things to say because Robin is briefing him on what to say, but is it from his heart and mind and conscience, or is he parroting from Robin's script? Is this genuine for him, or is he just saying the words that he knows he needs to say? If Cody doesn't mean the words and they come through Robin to him, to Janelle, is it really genuine and sincere? Does Cody really get it? And does saying the right words on the phone really make it better genuinely, regardless of who it comes from? I really doubt that. I doubt that just saying the right words on the phone really makes it better genuinely. Janelle says it was all better. She's okay. And she probably should have taken his call before she sat and stewed for 5 days. Janelle says, that's her. That's real. She says not a lot of people out there will understand that she chose this, and she knows it all gets better because she has experienced it before, and now she has these great relationships with her sister wives, and she has this great family. She says they live this really compressed emotional experience. They believe that makes them better people. She says they overcome themselves. Cody says when you marry a new wife, you have this kind of fruit basket upset where everything changes and it has to change for the better. And Cody says he has to become better. Last season, he was practically living monogamy at Robin's, and Cody created ridiculous C-19 mandates more stringent than the CDC guidelines. And when the other wives and kids couldn't comply with beyond the CDC guidelines, Cody used that as an excuse to live exclusively at Robin's, and he said his wives are obstacles to his goals. So has Cody become better? Cody says some of his wives have struggled with this, and Robin, knowing that, is able to actually tell Cody, hey dude, it's time for you to grow up. So he says we, meaning he and Robin, start giving them, his wives, what they have been asking for. So he says, we start giving them what they have been asking for. So because Robin said Cody needs to grow up, they have decided to start giving his other wives what they've been asking for. And he doesn't say I, he says we, meaning him and Robin have made this decision. Basically what they're doing is she's telling Cody how to give lip service to his wives to keep them on board, maybe to keep filming the show because Cody needs more than one wife for the show, maybe because she really doesn't want to break up the whole family structure, whatever. So she tells him what to say and he says it. But why is he saying we tell them, we give them what they want? We're giving them what they want now. That shows that he's just doing things out of obligation to just appease his wives and kind of manipulate them. And that really, I really didn't like that. See, Cody sees we, when he says we in that line, he's saying as he and Robin and them as his other wives, at Robin's urging to grow up, we, the team of she and Cody, have started giving them, his wives, what they have been asking for. What does that say? That is saying we. Robin and I, Robin is telling me what to say, and Robin and I know what the wives want, what lip service they want. We know how to keep them, how to kind of manipulate them. And since Robin is a woman and knows what they need to hear, she'll tell me what I need to say. And we've decided to throw them crumbs to give them what they want. You see this kind of peasant attitude? We decided to give them what they want because Robin said I need to grow up. Robin says she thinks it's important for them, his wives, to feel connected to Cody. Where does she get off as the new wife, thinking together she and Cody get to manage the wives and give them what they want? That shows you just like the level of manipulation from the start. Robin knows what she is doing, manipulation and manipulating the wives. And as a woman, she knows how the wives feel and what they need to hear to feel secure. And through Cody as her mouthpiece from day one, she dictated what crumbs Cody gives where and how much. Everything was always about Cody and Robin. Robin says it's important for the wives to feel connected to him, especially when he is alone with her, because she knows how important it is for her to feel connected to Cody when he's away or off with one of his other wives. Cody says those 7 days were hard on him when Janelle didn't want to talk to him. Janelle says she was mad and she is even a little angry now thinking about it. So she says she must not be admitting or processing or something. Janelle is actually very self-aware at times. Cody says when he and Janelle started into this thing, meaning their relationship, it started out very platonically. Janelle says she and Cody were very best friends before they got married, and she thinks that was the theme that continued into their relationship, into their marriage. Cody always thought Janelle was really cute, but she was his friend. Janelle says they were husband and wife, but they were really just best friends. Like they are husband and wife, they have kids together, but they're best friends. Cody says Janelle came to this place with him where they could talk so sweetly and openly with each other, and they weren't romantic. Janelle says it wasn't ever this giggly flowers and hearts, and that wasn't she and Cody's relationship. She has had relationships like that in the past, and she doesn't have that type of relationship with Cody. Cody says he has always wanted to be more romantic with Janelle, even if she's not the romantic type necessarily. He can make more of an effort, but he says they kind of get in their own grooves as a couple. He thinks what happens on some level is that Janelle has never been romantically inclined, but Janelle sees something happening romantically between he and Robin, and she thinks she's missing that. She's missing out on that. Janelle says to say that that's why she was mad, she doesn't think that's accurate. She doesn't think it was because of the relationship Robin and Cody have. And she says the relationships Robin and Cody have and she and Cody have are very different. They have very different vibes and different dynamics. Janelle thinks it was more just her coming to terms with where does she still fit in the picture. Like all the emotions she was having are about where she still fits in the picture. Cody says that Janelle has never been replaced. He isn't marrying another Janelle. He says Janelle will always be his best friend. Janelle says they really are ultimately best friends and they talk about everything and anything and they talk for a long time. But let's remember at the tell-all what happened. Janelle said Cody is her best friend. When asked why they were so in sync, are they so in sync? They must be so in sync. Cody said they're not in sync at all, he and Janelle. And he didn't refer to Janelle as his best friend. When asked, do you love Janelle? Are you still in love with him? He said what? He said, why don't you ask her? She'll tell you she's not in love with me. He didn't even regard her as if she's the mother of his kids almost. It was very bizarre. He didn't even say that they're best friends. He just said, we're not in sync. During the long conversations that Janelle and Cody have, Christine says Janelle's relationship with Cody was always something she was jealous over because Janelle was valued by Cody as an intellectual. So Christine and Cody never talk for hours. He doesn't value Christine as an intellectual. And Mary says she sees how Cody is with each of them, how he's different with each of his wives. And she says, you wish you had that, like the grass is always greener, and it's hard to see what it is that is special about you. That's sad. You should feel like your husband finds you to be special, and you should find them special and find your relationship. Know what's very special and unique and on point about your relationship. And the fact that you have 4 other relationships that function well to look at, if you're in a bad relationship with your husband, I'm sure that gives even more self-doubt and questioning and insecurity into that relationship. That's terrible to have to deal with. Back in the honeymoon suite, Cody tells Robin he is going to call home while they have a chance. He calls Mary, who isn't happy because she misses him, and he tells Mary he misses her too. They texted each other about their dreams and what they want to do in their lives, and he tells Mary he liked that. Robin and Cody got back from their sexcation, and Cody says the family is now looking for their new normal and wanting things to settle, and Cody is going to leave work and he's going to make dinner with the kids for everybody while the wives go shopping together. Robin reveals that when they got back from the honeymoon, Christine was on the phone with her in tears, telling Robin, tell me you needed this. And Robin starts scrunching her face, the usual crocodile tears type of scenario. And she says, She is not going to cry all the time. She lets viewers know she's not going to be the one to cry all the time. Every opportunity for crocodile tears, she takes it. Any occasion to milk out a tear or put on the fake waterworks and try to get sympathy and be viewed as, oh, I'm so emotional. Oh, I'm not accepted in the family. Tears for any occasion, anytime she can squeeze out a tear, even if it's nothing to be crying over, she will squeeze out a tear for. She is crying 24/7. And then she does her classic, oh, I'm sorry to the cameras, apologizing to cameras. So Robin reassured Christine that she did. She really, really needed this time, referring to her 11-day sexcation that left the wives angry, insecure, and emotional in tears and dealing with a roller coaster of emotions. This is the level of selfishness both Cody and Robin have, that they take no shame in their actions and behaviors because they needed it and wanted it above everyone else's suffering for the 11-day honeymoon in paradise. That was needed. Suffering of the wives, unequal treatment, unfair standards, different standards, all of that thrown out the window to be damned. Suffering be damned. It was needed. Christine rationalizes that the 11 days for Robin was necessary. And once Robin said that to Christine, she thought, oh, that's sad. Janelle says Cody is very good at doing what he thinks is best for each wife, and he tailors what he does. It's not like cookie cutter, like you get 4 days for your honeymoon and you get 4 days. It's sad watching these women grasp at straws to try and rationalize Cody's behavior, to try and spin it into a positive and a benefit that everything is tailored to them. Everything is not tailored to them. Cody does things unequally across the board. He gives more time to one wife, bigger vacations to one wife, a bigger house to one wife, a nanny to one wife. Everyone gets different, and they're trying to now rationalize and spin, saying, oh, it's not that it's different or unfair or unequal. It's not unfair that she gets an 11-day trip to paradise and we got 3-day road trips, to Cody's parents' house for our honeymoons. That's just because it was specifically tailored to us. Cody's really taking the time to customize everything. They're really grasping at straws to try to make this look okay and sound okay and spin it into a positive and a benefit that everything is tailored to them. At the beginning of the episode, Janelle admitted that Cody never would have taken her 11 days. He never would have been willing to spend 11 days for her honeymoon. And Mary even said for her 20th anniversary trip to Mexico, she only got 3 days. And she said, even when she said this, that she wishes that she felt like she mattered more to Cody, that she mattered the same as Robin. Saying it's not unequal, it's not unfair, it's perfectly fine. It's actually a benefit because Cody is tailoring everything to your needs. He customizes for you. Janelle insists all the wives need different things, and Cody does that. Mary says they all need different things at different times, and sometimes they accept it because they are in a good place with themselves. And sometimes it's really hard to accept because of how selfish they are being at the moment. So sometimes they're able to accept that they know that they matter less or they matter more or they get unequal time or unequal money or unequal investment, unequal presence, unequal vacation length. And sometimes if they're in a good place with themselves, they can accept it. But because of some deficiency in themselves and how selfish they are, when they're really being weak and deficient and selfish, it's really hard to accept that Cody is so amazing, that he does different things. He tailors it to each of his wives, and it's not unequal. For example, that they would get 3-day trips while Robin gets 11-day trips. That's perfectly normal because he's customizing. He's tailoring it to what you need. You only needed the 3-day trip, and Robin really needed the 11-day trip. And when they have trouble accepting that unfairness and the unequal treatment of Cody to his wives, then they are being selfish, they're being weak. It's such a problem, and then it becomes hard to accept. So they're deluding themselves that the reason that this is such a problem is because it's a weakness in them that they're seeing this as a problem, that they're even noticing it. It shouldn't be a problem. They don't deserve better. When in reality, they actually should feel like they do deserve more. It's okay to feel like I don't feel like I matter as much as Robin because he's giving me less than what she got. It's okay to feel that way. It's not selfish. It's not weak. It's completely normal. And it's normal to demand equal and to expect equal and to want equal and to feel like you matter less. And it's not because you're being selfish that you feel that way. And it's not this ridiculous brainwashy excuse, oh, Cody does different things because wives need different things at different times. Every relationship is different, so it's acceptable. It's not that. They're grasping at straws to try and rationalize it because they know that it's wrong. They know it's wrong. They know it's wrong themselves, but they want to make polygamy look good. In order to try to make Cody not look like an asshole, the way, even though they said those things before, like, I don't feel like I matter as much as Robin got more time than me. This is unfair. We don't get our time with Cody. We feel insecure about this. We feel upset about this. We feel like we don't matter. I'm very angry and I don't understand why because I'm not jealous. So they know that it's unfair. They know it's wrong. They know that they're feeling these things and they feel that it's because they are being selfish and they're not in a good place with themselves. It's their weakness to overcome. It's their problem. And Cody is so wonderful. The way they're explaining it away and justifying it is he's so wonderful. He does different things because different relationships need different things at different times and different wives have different needs and need different things. And that makes it acceptable and it doesn't. Cody gets home in his 2-seater convertible and he says the length of the honeymoon was really important. And there were a gazillion reasons, of course, that he and Robin needed to take that time. And the wives will work hard to make Cody look good and justify the suffering and give reasons till kingdom come of why it's justified for Robin to get different standards, like this new one of Cody being so in tune that he tailors experiences to all his wife's needs. Cody says the dynamic for Mary, Janelle, and Christine was all very different because they didn't have children initially, and there wasn't the complexity of this big family and a little family coming together. So Cody insists that his other wives got something very unique and special in this early time in their lives together. But Robin needed this, and the reason now that it's justified that she needed this 11 days and he's being such a wonderful husband tailoring the experience is because we have a big family blended with her little family. And so Robin needs this time and it's justified. But the other wives got very special experiences with their 3-day road trips to his parents' house because they didn't have the complication of kids and a big family. So it's totally acceptable. Love how Cody said that he has a gazillion reasons that justify the 11-day trip for Robin when his other wives got different, but he really can only name one. It's a reason that has nothing to do with why you would need a longer honeymoon at all. It has nothing to do with it. Cody says he needed Robin to be able to have a unique experience developing a relationship in this place. Robin says in the very beginning, there is this promise of this very sweet, loving relationship between her and Cody's other wives, this sisterhood. Robin says as time progresses and the other sister wives see she and Cody's relationship, it's almost like that dream of that sisterhood got yanked out from under her because the wives are having their struggles. And now Robin sees these little glimmers of hope from them coming out of that might still be possible. Robin says maybe these things she wanted in the beginning, these relationships she wants with each of Cody's wives are still possible because she wants those relationships with her sister wives as much as she wants Cody and the family. As the wives are shopping, Cody asks if Garrison wants to bake a cake to celebrate their big family. Robin says one of the biggest things that attracted her to Cody was his love for his wives. She says the fact that Cody saw value in each one of the girls for different reasons, for who they were, for their strengths and their weaknesses, was like she just drooled over that. Robin tries something on, obviously trying to show off. The wives are all going shopping together. And Christine tells Robin it's unflattering because she looks completely flat-chested, to be honest. And Robin feigns being insulted. And Christine said if someone told her something made her look flat-chested, she'd be fine with that. And she asks Robin, are you not secure in that issue? Robin says, just pick out my flaws one by one, Christine. And Christine says it's not a flaw to her. Cody says it was so important to him that he be able to talk about how much he loved Mary, Christine, and Janelle with Robin. And Robin says she loved hearing about it. Cody says if that freaked Robin out, he wouldn't pull her into this. Robin says she loves to know that Cody is loving his other wives, because that means he will love her too. Cody says people who aren't him, he doesn't expect to get him. He says it's kind of enigmatic that he loves all of his wives. Cody says to him, loving more than one wife is not far from loving more than one child. He says when Truly comes into the family, it's this beautiful experience and everyone is in love with her and she's not taking anything away from Logan or his other kids. So when Robin comes into the family, she isn't taking anything away from anybody else, Cody says. He says he still has as much depth of love and affection for his other wives as he ever did. Robin says as time goes on, they are touching on all of the things that made them separate families and making it more of all of them being one family. Christine thinks they're forgiving more, they are loving more, and they're definitely accepting Robin as a wife instead of just a girlfriend. Robin says there is this really cool element in that Truly, Aurora, Brianna, and Dayton all came into the family at the same time. So according to Robin, they have this unique bond between the four of them. Cody says the whole family just recently did something together, and at the end, Dayton stopped and he said, I've joined the best family in the world. Mary says this plural lifestyle that they are living is synonymous in a way with a woman who decides to have a baby. She knows what is ahead of her. She knows there is discomfort involved. But at the end, she has this beautiful blessing. But that is what their situation is right now. They have a lot of pain and discomfort that they are all dealing with. But at the end of it, Mary thinks they will have something that's really special for them. Wow, is it really special for Mary now? Cody wouldn't even call her once during the pandemic. He won't touch her with a 10-foot pole. He won't see her. He doesn't even really treat her as he would an acquaintance or even as the mother of his child. So that's really so sad to hear her say these things. Anyways, Cody bakes a cake and he lights candles and he wants everyone to blow them out together to mark the end of one chapter and the start of their new family. Wow. How far we've come from there. Now, as we know, obviously, Christine has left the family. Mary, basically, she has a minimal relationship with Robin and her kids. Cody basically won't touch her with a 10-foot pole. I mean, she might get allowed in for Thanksgiving or Christmas, but he made it clear he wants nothing to do with her ever again, even as a friend, basically. So that's kind of sad. Anyways, that's the end of this episode. I will be doing the next episode, which is, I believe it's a Sister Wives special, but it's the first episode of season 2, and I will definitely be covering that shortly next week sometime. I'm also going to be doing a viewer request. Most likely I'll be doing it very soon. I don't know how soon, but as soon as I can. On the Johnny Depp Amber Heard leaked audio, she wants me to do a commentary on that. I'm not going to play the actual audio on my channel, but I will listen to it and give my opinion on it at some point. I don't know if I'll do it this weekend, beginning of next week, but I'll definitely do that. I'm also definitely going to be doing the next episode of Sister Wives. I believe it's the special where they speak with Meredith Vieira. It's the first episode of season 2. I don't know the exact title. Okay, I'll see you guys soon. Thanks so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. You guys know that I love to hear your thoughts. See you soon. Bye.